Well, it's been a huge and busy week in US politics. Democrats have escalated their impeachment investigation against President Donald Trump, meaning he could be impeached over the next week or so.
Yes, and for more on this, we are joined by Politico reporter Daniel Lippman. Daniel, hello to you. Now, Democrats in the US House of Representatives, they met behind closed doors, but the White House has declined an offer to partake in the House impeachment inquiry.
Yeah, Democrats, they wanted the White House participation because then they can give Trump a fair shake. But the White House didn't want to give the House impeachment inquiry any credibility. They are banking on the Senate trial. The Senate, of course, is controlled by Republicans and Mitch McConnell, the majority leader. And so they feel like they can make their case there to try to say that Trump didn't do anything wrong and that this was a perfect call with the Ukrainian leader, as he has said many times.
As time goes by and people observe this from afar, many are thinking it's the best thing for Donald Trump because the Democrats are on the other side arguing with each other, and this impeachment inquiry is really giving him the opportunity to say this is another opportunity for people to have a crack at me. And so this could just sail him back into office next year.
I would push back a little bit because he does not want the legacy hit, the hit to his legacy because of this impeachment. And so he is really mad at how this is happening. But he could make some political hay out of this whole effort. He always talks about how the economy is doing so well. And I was talking to someone recently, and they said they made the good point that the economy has been doing so well for so many years in the States that usually you wouldn't kick out whoever's president. But because the economy is doing great, voters can focus on other issues like the president's character and decide whether they want to keep Trump in, a person who kind of seems to think he's above the law in the eyes of many Democrats.
Let's talk about the NATO summit, the 70th NATO summit that occurred in London this week, and it was certainly, well, we saw the peers of Donald Trump being mocking him behind his back. Joe Biden turned it into a campaign ad. Let's take a look at that.
World leaders mocking President Trump.
They're laughing at him.
My administration has accomplished more than almost any administration in the history of our country. Didn't expect that reaction, but that's okay.
World leaders mocking and ridiculing him for being completely off balance.
Allies are deeply worried about it. They say he's becoming increasingly isolated. Something is very wrong.
The world sees Trump for what he is: insincere, ill-informed, corrupt, dangerously incompetent, and incapable, in my view, of world leadership. And if we give Donald Trump 4 more years, we'll have a great deal of difficulty, if ever, being able to recover America's standing in the world and our capacity to bring nations together.
Daniel, a lot of people saying that Joe Biden had a good week. Did he get a good response from what you heard?
Yeah, these ads and these videos that he's making on this effort to portray Trump as someone that world leaders don't trust at all, they are doing pretty well online. They seem to have gotten some viral pickup because Joe Biden is positioning himself as the safe pair of hands that America, we're not going to move to a socialist country if Bernie Sanders got his way, that Joe Biden, he's already been vice president for 8 years, and that he deserves to give the presidency a go, and that he has all these relationships with world leaders, and they don't laugh at him. They actually encouraged him to run for office. That's a story I had back in March, and so he's kind of the opposite of Trump in that way.
But there is an issue here with Joe Biden and many others. He is an ageing politician. I know that he's done wonderful things, but the Democrats at the moment, if you look at what is going on, there's an air of a shambolic nature. So he doesn't have tough opposition, Donald Trump, at the moment.
I think it's too early to say how the election will shake out in a year or 11 months. Because we haven't had the first votes and caucuses yet. Those come up in early next year. And once there's a nominee, I think the Democratic Party will likely come together to try not to, write the election, to take the election for granted. That was Clinton's big mistake. She didn't even go to states like Wisconsin and Ohio much, and Michigan and Pennsylvania, while she was trying to rack up the score by going to Texas and Arizona. And so only 70,000 votes separated Trump and Hillary Clinton in those 3 states. And so if they can turn the tide in those states, and looks like they have a shot at it, and then keep that popular vote margin. Remember, Hillary won by 3 million votes in the popular vote. Then they have a good chance to win.
The Democratic next debate is on December 19 in LA this week. Kamala Harris, she pulled out. Do you think this is a smart move? And there's also talk of her being a good vice president.
Yeah, she's always been seen as someone who could be a good, second candidate on that slot. But she also is worried about a primary in California for her Senate job, and she was never able to. A lot of people thought of Kamala as a perfect candidate who would do great things, but her campaign was a mess. It was lots of internal fighting, and she was never able to keep to a consistent message. No one knew why she was running, and when she got in a tough situation over things like healthcare or even busing, the forced busing to stop segregation, then she was very confused about where she stood. And so if you want to be president, you have to have a clear message so people know what they're getting.
We've seen some live pictures coming out of Pearl Harbor this morning Australian time, the 78th anniversary, of course, of the bombing. Some worrying moments, some deadly moments, not only in Pearl Harbor this week, but also in Florida.
Yeah, it's very tragic and very sad. You saw 2 mass shooting incidents in Florida just this week. The police got some criticism for taking it too far and being too trigger happy. And so Joe Biden and other Democratic candidates, and Michael Bloomberg especially, who has spent millions of dollars on gun control, they see this as a huge problem. And that they want to fix this. And so I think if a Democrat wins next year against Trump, we're very likely to see some type of gun control, even though Democrats have been trying to push for that for years. But it feels like there might be some type of tipping point.
And just finally, Daniel, the long-awaited meeting between Zelensky and Russian President Vladimir Putin is set to take place next week. Why do you think it's important not only for Ukraine and Russia, but America? Well,
Zelensky is one of the reasons why Trump is in this impeachment, query in the first place, because he had that famous call. And so if Zelensky and Putin can come to some type of deal to have peace in Crimea and other separatist parts of Ukraine, then that would be good news for Trump and good news for the world, because Ukraine has really... even some tech companies, they make Crimea as part of Russia. And so I think America is really watching to see if these talks can come to some type of success. And remember that impeachment effort is about military aid that the U.S. was going to give to Ukraine, which we eventually did give to Ukraine, to fight back against Russian aggression against Putin, who Trump seems to be buddy-buddy with, at least when he meets with him.